Okay, so to the critical thinking bit, and again, I don't think this is new, certainly this is not new. I think one thing that we particularly have to think about as we do our research is introspect about our own biases. And it is not that uncommon, even for scholars who should know better, for example, it's just a human tendency, for example, to look for information that confirms the things that we already believe, and to gravitate towards ideas that are familiar, to ideas that sound right to us. But we don't want to just go and find stuff that already sounds right. We really want to look inwards and say, well, is it right? Why do we think it's right? What is the evidence that is being presented? We really don't want our opinions, our values to drive how we look through, how we evaluate information. And we also, of course, want to look in and see what is affecting our judgments when we judge particular sources, when we make our analyses. Why are we drawing these connections that we're drawing? This might not necessarily show up in your writing, but this is the thing that will ultimately lead you to quality work. So there are these, there's this philosopher, I don't know if I pronounced it. Okay. And he has this wonderful paper about echo chambers and epistemic bubbles. And he distinguishes these two in the following way. So epistemic bubbles are the kinds of kind of communities that we find ourselves in because we tend to gravitate to talking, discussing things, consuming information from sources that we generally agree with. If you have, say, certain political leanings, you are most likely to read news from sources that have similar leanings as you. When you're talking to your friends or members of your community, you most likely share some kind of core of experience. And so oftentimes what that means is that we inevitably, even if unintentionally, end up leaving important perspectives out, so that we end up not hearing important ideas or important perspectives from people who are outside of our communities. And that's just a situation that all of us find ourselves in. So how do we get out of a situation like that? Well, we try to step out of our community. We try to invite voices into kind of our daily life that might not be that might not have had the same kind of experiences that we have had. And the nice thing about epistemic bubbles is that that kind of interaction usually fixes it. Now, something that's much more pernicious is the phenomenon of echo chambers. And I don't expect any of you to find yourselves in that, but it is important to realize that there are a lot of communities, both online and offline these days, that are that specifically base themselves around certain kinds of beliefs and mistrusting anyone who contradicts that point of view. So one thing, sort of one funny and sad psychological fact is that when somebody in such a community is faced with contrary evidence, or if you question them, or question their beliefs, the psychological impulse is not for them to question also, but actually to entrench further. So frequently, what happens is that it's actually counterproductive to engage with folks like that about the thing that they're deeply committed to, because they're just going to walk away feeling even stronger about their own position. And I hope you do not find yourselves in this position, but you are likely to encounter people once in a while who are in such positions. And so I want you to be aware that this is something that our current media landscape is very much trying to pull us towards. And AI is part of that. So one of the things that AI does, if you're on your phone, targeted ads or AI-based suggestions are going to pull you towards more and more niche communities. AI also makes it, because you are more likely to engage with things that you already agree with, AI siphons you into algorithms that feed you information that just repeats stuff that you already believe. And so now, in our current media landscape, it is all the more important for you to actively try and step out of that. Ask, okay, what kind of sources am I not hearing from? Let me go and let me try and find other perspectives. Because the kinds of algorithms online are trying to siphon you towards one particular perspective. Not necessarily, so one thing that we see all the time, even before AI was such a thing, for example in YouTube, where there will be conspiracy theory videos that are very long, and that YouTube ends up suggesting to you, even if you start watching something that's only kind of tangentially related. And so then if you end up watching one of them, it will recommend more of them to you, because, well, if it's a long video, then YouTube is going to get that much more ad money from you watching that video. And so there is a way that they actually end up rewarding watching information that is not necessarily reliable. Of course, as I already mentioned, AI does spread a lot of misinformation quickly, because it's just so easy to generate AI things. It is very easy to generate images, it is very easy to generate content, and we have to be all that much more critical when we approach those sources. And finally, this is a bit of a technical issue, the garbage in, garbage out issue. So this is not even just an issue with AI, it's an issue with algorithms in general. One thing that can be really tempting is to think, well, I am a biased person, and so if I make a decision that can be very fallible, But if a computer makes a decision, it's probably making the decision based on a lot of important factors. There's a kind of sense of objectivity about the outputs of a computer algorithm. So for example, there are banks that will use computer algorithms to try and determine whether to give somebody a loan. And they will use a particular kind of computer algorithm that will take some basic information about a person and then spit out a decision about whether a loan should be given to that person. Now, one thing that we find is that algorithms, because again, remember, just like AI is trained on human-generated content, these algorithms are also trained on data that's fed to them by the creators. And what that means is that these algorithms often reproduce the kinds of discriminatory biases that the humans who made the algorithm have. So in the kind of example that I just gave you about feeding some information into an algorithm and it spits out whether this person should get a loan, it has been proven over and over again that these algorithms start discriminating based, say, on race. Why? Well, because there are a lot of demographic patterns that make it the case that things aren't spread equally. And then the algorithm picks up this correlation and says, aha, well, say people of X race tend to be in, say, this kind of class demographic. So I'm just going to use this as a heuristic. Race is a heuristic about whether a loan should be given. Because the algorithm is trying to find the most common correlations in the data that it's given. And frequently the data ends up corrupted. So one of the things is that it's not even possible really to take these biases out of the algorithms. Because you can tell an algorithm, for example, to not use things like race and sex in its calculations. But if there is a correlation between the things that it's looking at and race and sex, an algorithm will find something that serves as a proxy for race and sex, and it will use that thing as the determinant. So for example, if you say, okay, we don't want, when we're hiring somebody for a computer job, we don't want to discriminate against older people, because I think there is a general stereotype that old people cannot use computers as well as younger people. So suppose we say we don't want that kind of discrimination. So you tell your algorithm not to use age as a thing that calculates whether they're a good candidate for your job. Well, if the data that the algorithm is taught on, if that data is itself biased, as in it reflects the kind of discrimination that we have, then it will find something that generally correlates with age, and it will pick based on that. So you really want to be very careful about trusting the output of computer algorithms. You want to know, why is it making this decision? Do not outsource your thinking to computer programs. Next slide. Okay, so this is, I think we're about, okay, so these are are my last kind of thoughts. Saying all of that, so I've given you a bunch of reasons not to use AI. In your writing, in your reading, in your thinking. But you might think, well, why not? I mean, after all, maybe say like I won't turn in work that is written by AI, but it might be fun to just like generate a bunch of AI images just for yourself. Suppose you want a particular kind of art and you want to generate a bunch of it. Yeah, fair enough. But I think even for that, we should be very mindful about whether we use AI for a variety of reasons. I mean, first of all, and actually both of the first two points are both connected to the same idea, is that AI requires a ton of energy. And currently what's happening is that people are building huge data centers that are focused on supporting the AI functions that people use. And the issue is that these centers use a ton of water, first for cooling the machines, and also they use a ton of electricity. And so if you think that water is a limited resource, which it is, and if you generally in your life try to conserve water, a short conversation with ChatGPT uses 500 milliliters of water. If you use ChatGPT to write a short email, it's the same as using 500 milliliters of water. By itself, that's not a ton. But over time, this is the kind of thing that collects. And so you really want to be mindful about when you use these things. Of course, there are things that might be very well worth this kind of resource. For instance, there's a lot of really amazing research that can be done in the medical sciences or in computing using AI because of how quickly AI can generate things, because of how quickly it can solve important issues. Then we might think that these considerations are outweighed by the good that these kinds of uses of AI will have. But for us, for general folk, it is likely that we're not doing anything that important when we're using AI. And so I would encourage you, to the extent that you care about conserving water, for instance, to avoid using AI. Further, these same data centers are also being frequently built in communities that already don't have stable electric grids. And so it has been continuously reported that power outages in the areas where these data centers are built are becoming more and more frequent. And so, there are reports of, say, doctors that end up having to do surgery by flashlight because the power went out, because the new AI data center is sucking up all the energy. So I think there is a genuine human cost to using AI because it's sucking power from resources that are really important to people in the areas where those data centers are located. And finally, there is also the issue of theft. And because we talked about, what AI does, right? It takes in stuff that we have already created and spits out garbled up versions of it. And so, first of all, what we end up having is AI, for example, taking research work that people have done and spitting stuff out based on it without crediting the people whose work it's drawing from. Because again, AI doesn't think, it's just predicting. So it doesn't know that it should cite its sources. And again, remember, when it does cite its sources, they're frequently made up sources. But also, these days we have a lot of uses of people saying, using other people's images. They're using their faces to generate AI content that makes it look like somebody is saying something, or makes it sound like somebody is saying something. And it is actually putting, not only is it putting a lot of artists out of work, but actually it also violates a lot of people's rights, because a lot of people are using AI as a way to, say, generate obscene content and thereby harass particular people. You can take somebody's face and generate, say, pornographic images with them using AI. That is an instance of harassment, but it's also the theft of somebody's face. And so the thing that I want to wrap up with is that when you're doing your research as incoming PhD scholars, it is, well, as I've said, it is really important to read critically and write critically and think critically, but it's also really important to avoid doing harm out in the world, or to try to minimize our harm in the world. And AI, more than we wish it would, it participates in directly harming people. It spreads misinformation, so it also spreads lies, and also it participates in theft. So as monastics, I heard that you were reciting the Vinaya earlier today, so I hope that it is particularly salient that AI is a tool that does not help us lead a life in line with the commitments that we have frequently made, our ethical and religious commitments. So I think that's it.
This is the time for questions.
Excellent.
Các vị nào hỏi